has.
But there are other factors you're hiring off of as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. But would you fire based on a core value?
I think I would, actually, to be quite honest.
That's good.
But I've been around the block. I've had experiences where
you've learned to do this.
Yeah, I've blown this one.
Welcome to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle, with your host, Rob Schultz. Rob is the founder and president of Schultz Wealth. All opinions expressed by Rob and his guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Schultz Wealth Limited. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Please refer to our website for more information.
Welcome everybody to P&L, Priorities and Lifestyle. I am your host, Rob Schultz, and today we have Jeff Schafer in the house. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, Rob. How are things?
Things are good. Things are good. Yeah, I was telling you when we were starting today that I'm really excited to have an EOS implementer in today. And I think that there's some people out there listening that are going, okay, well, that maybe sounds exciting, but what does EOS stand for and what does an EOS implementer do? So I think we ought to start with that. And just to give some background here, I guess there was a book that came out, right? Traction. Yeah. Gino Wickman.
By Gino Wickman.
Yep.
Yes.
When did that come out? Do you remember?
Oh, it's been about 16 years.
Yeah, wow.
EOS has been out. But let me tell you what EOS is.
Okay, yeah.
We can get talking about the book. We can talk about all sorts of things, but I think we got to lay in some context.
Yeah, so what does it stand for, first of all?
So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Okay.
And so this guy, Gino Wickman, he started like at the age of 21. He was brought in, he's been an entrepreneur since then. Around 25, he was brought into his family business and he noticed it was in need of a serious turnaround. So he turned the company around over about 3 years. He ultimately retired from that company 7 years later. And during that time, he kind of realized he's got a knack and a passion for the art and science of running a truly great entrepreneurial business. He just turned this thing around. So he worked with EO Detroit, Entrepreneurs Organization,
yeah,
Detroit.
Of course.
He's one of the founding members, and he cobbled together what we know as EOS. So
he did that first and then wrote the book?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So it all started because he just wanted to solve these problems in his family business. So you could imagine he had some skin in the game. It was his, he's a young 25-year-old kid, and he's brought in to run this company, and he just has to figure it out. Well, he pulled all the levers, he read all the books, and he found out what works and what doesn't work. So it started with just a small community, and it grew and it grew. And now I think we're in over 130,000 organizations across the globe have used EOS.
Yeah, I mean, I hear about it all the time. I have a number of clients and friends that use the process and use implementers, and they talk this whole language that, I've read the book, but I've never actually been in an EOS process. We're so small that we really haven't gone that way at this point. But it's just absolutely fascinating to me to watch. And I personally have seen a number of organizations really up their game through this process, through this operating system, as you call it. So that's why I was so excited to have you on. But how did you get involved in EOS? When did the light bulb go off, and when did you decide that you were gonna do this as your passion?
It's funny. I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And what happened with me is I was stubborn. My business partner handed me the Traction book. It must have been like 2013 or 2012.
Yeah.
And it was around the time we were thinking about exiting. We were really having a hard time. And I just shelved it. I didn't do a thing. And I continued to work in the business, and I hit a ceiling. I got to the point where we sold the business. I bought it off him, then we sold it. Anyways, it was rough. I had to throw the white flag in. But the first thing that the company who bought my company did was they hired me back. And after that, they hired an EOS implementer. And I watched my company that I worked on for 14 years, I watched it triple in size over 3 years.
Okay, wait a second. So you had this company, you were just, grinding through it, trying to make things happen for 14 years, right? And then
it's not like it was not a success either.
I mean, you
I had a great
sold
company.
it, but then they tripled it in what amount of time?
3 years.
In 3 years.
Yeah, we
And
won awards, and
there could have been some other things that were going on too, or was it just pretty much trying to get in there and get this operating system going?
I always thought that the key was grit and hard work. That was, to me, that was it.
It's part of it.
It's like, I don't know anybody who can outwork me, so I'm gonna work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of thought leaders who say, hey, that's the key ingredient, you got to use that. But I had to learn how to work smart and healthy. I had to be both healthy and smart. It's kind of it's something that they teach in EOS, and really, it's hard to explain in one sort of brief, sentence or paragraph. But essentially, through all those experiences, I left that company, and I brought EOS into a few more companies. And the last one, after sort of assimilating what all this is and how it works, I actually took a little startup on and 5x'd it in a year and exited. I just decided, hey, this is what I should be doing. I should be doing EOS. So that's what happened. It's kind of like a whirlwind tour for me, but I don't know if that answers the question of what is EOS.
Well,
and that's what I want to make sure.
So let's say, so you shelved the book, and then you sold your business. They brought you back in, and they put you through EOS. And if you can go back, tell me what your first impression was when you initially were first exposed to it.
Well, this very high energy guy spent 90 minutes with us, just telling us all these moving parts of EOS. And I was just making notes copiously, just thinking, what can I take from this? I didn't even think we were going to move ahead with it. I thought I'm just going to take the best parts of this and bring it back into the company. But when I heard the whole thing, I just realized the one thing that EOS is that I didn't do, and the one thing that I think could be a key ingredient, it wasn't everything, was that it was simple. It wasn't complex. And it forced simplicity on all the executive. And so the need to overcomplicate is just sort of diffused by the entire system.
So give me an example of that, like where like me as a business owner, I see complexity and you help me simplify. Give me an example.
I'll give you two.
Okay.
I'll give you two. One that I see all the time.
Okay.
And one that people just ignore that they shouldn't. So the one,
very good.
Yeah, the one that I see all the time is measurables, KPIs, scorecard. People measure more things than they need to. They measure a lot of how did I do, but they don't measure their activities to be able to reinforce those good activities. With EOS, we teach our teams to measure 5 to 15 numbers that give you a true pulse on the business, and you look at those week by week. And we ask that they have activity-based measurables so that you know that these things that you're doing, if you're doing them well, you'll get more of the great things that those activities create instead of always looking back. Here are my results. Now, what should I do? Because you'll never have time. That type of lagging stuff works great for quarter and month analysis, but week to week. So just simple things like keep it to 5 numbers or maybe 15, somewhere in that range.
And these aren't necessarily historical numbers of like true numbers, but this is stuff like the stuff that you're actually doing.
Yeah.
Like for us, it would be, how many client appointments did we have last week? Or I don't know, I can't.
Phone calls, whatever.
Phone calls or whatever it may be, or just that activity piece that we
Touch
know,
points.
That we know that results in the numbers that we're looking for. But I guess if you're always looking back at the numbers, which let's all be honest, we don't all close our books, on the third, right? But sometimes by the time you're looking at the last quarter, for instance, you're well into this next quarter.
It's already complicated because you're always calculating. So just to be clear, why I'm saying that that's simple is because it's easy to count a week's worth of activities, but it's hard to calculate what did I do, what did I not do, how should I interpret that number.
Okay.
If you have to start calculating and not just tallying is easy, but if you have to calculate, it might not be the number. And if you have like 30 numbers that you're measuring and you're a 10-person company, you might have too many, even if you're like a 40-person company, should you have Like, do you need so much granularity? Which of those numbers really made the quarter last quarter? As if you got to keep it simple. So that's the one I see wrong all the time.
So I'm thinking from a sales standpoint.
Not wrong, but
because we're more like service and sales. But what are some examples of some of these activity numbers? Like, for instance, in a distribution company or I don't know, a manufacturer, light manufacturer or service, HVAC contractor. What are some of the things that they can be tracking?
Well, let's take HVAC. There are things that people are taking phone calls and, do they get a thank you? A thank you is a result of doing something great. Write down how many thank yous did you get? Add them up at the end of the week. How many thank yous did we get? That's not measuring all the good things that got you the thank you, but you know that if people are actually, measuring these things that they're doing, that they're going to do more of them. We only had 50 thank yous last week. What's going on? Did that person not show up?
Interesting. Okay.
So that's a way that, and that you could mention, like, you could think of every industry and what they might want to do. And I really leave it up to my clients. I don't actually go in and say, hey, this is what you should be measuring. I help bring it out of them. I'm a teacher, facilitator, and coach. I teach them the system, I facilitate, and I coach, but I'm not a consultant. I actually don't go in and tell them.
So what's the difference? What do you think of as a consultant compared to being a teacher, facilitator, and coach? What are some of the differences?
Well, a consultant, and I've been a consultant in the past, a consultant works themselves into a job, and they will actually try to, they'll find ways to get deeper into the operations of your business. Mm-hmm. Whereas the teacher, facilitator, coach, and any EOS implementer, we work ourselves out of a job. Actually, we just work to get somebody strong enough that they can do this on their own, then we back out.
Sure.
Some of them keep us around, but to run their quarterlies, or if something changes, or maybe just to run their annual meetings. But really, once we teach, we get out. That's our purpose.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that makes sense. So how long does it take, for you to get somebody up and running? I know it varies, but
well, it's 60 days. It's about 60 days. Some lengthen it to about 75, but that gets you sort of practiced. In the first 60 days are like there's actual work to do, and it feels like it's a layer. And then eventually, every day that you do it, it feels like it's not a layer. Some people think that EOS is something that gets added on to what you're doing, and they're like, I don't have time for this. But really, it's just a change in what you're doing. It's just a change in what you're doing. So you, like this scorecard.
Yeah.
We were doing 20 numbers and we talk about them for 20 minutes. Well, we have something called a level 10 meeting. And when you have this meeting, we're going to ask that you have 5 to 15 numbers. You're going to have fewer numbers, and we ask that you talk about them a lot less. And if there's an issue with one, you drop it down. So it's a different way of dealing with what you were dealing with before. It's just a different way of spending your time.
Okay, and you said, you had that level 10 meeting. So I hear meetings and I hear time. Okay.
Right.
So, I would assume that, the leadership is getting around and they're communicating. And I'm also assuming that in a lot of these cases, they weren't communicating previously.
Yeah, it kind of, from company to company, it depends.
It depends.
And some people say, "Oh, another meeting."
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to make all this time to be able to have all these meetings, and how long are these meetings going to take?
Well,
and
luckily, we started this conversation with you asking, "What did I do?
Yeah,
like, how did I get into it?" And this is exactly what I thought. I was like,
"Yeah,
how long is that meeting? Every week? Are you kidding me?" But my implementer said, "Just trust me." And now what I say to my clients, I say, just trust me and please understand. I tell them the answer. I tell them what happens. And what happens is, instead of getting interrupted a million times in the week, instead of having all this urge to just solve a problem that you don't need to solve that day, then because you think you'll forget, or it's somebody, you just get fewer calls and everybody just runs more efficiently because everything gets put into that one meeting that needs to be put there. Of course, you still have other meetings as needed, but you have less unnecessary meetings. And the net win is huge. The net win is that everybody gets on the same page and burns bright in that time and works together. And then they can work with autonomy and with efficiency afterwards. And I mean, my company, we were in Vancouver, Canada. We were in Frisco, Texas. And I was growing and expanding it. And I read every book. I did everything I could on my own. I built systems but I couldn't figure that out, what I just described. I couldn't figure out how to get the team together to work together. I mean, with some folks that I hired, they were just, some were better than others, and I could sort of get it together. But I sort of bunked out. I could build a good leader, but I couldn't get a leader to be a good leader themselves. That's where I was capped on my. And so that's what EOS taught me. It taught me not just how to hire good leaders and to be a good leader, but it taught me how to build good leaders. So that was a game changer.
So that autonomy is a big part of that.
Yes.
Because I try to relate it back to kind of what we do. So, our whole process, our operating system is around client meetings, right?
Yeah.
And we found that the more structured and disciplined we are in our client meetings, the more autonomous both our client will go out and do the things that they need to do, and we'll do the things we need to do in between meetings. There's kind of less of this, just follow-up less worrying, less activity between each other. You just have this meeting that you come together and you say, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're talking about. This is what needs to happen. There's a follow-up, that happens, of official follow-up, that this is what we're going to do over the next 6 months, is what you're going to do. And then it's all about trying to get that done. And then you come back for the next meeting. And it's not like, you really have to communicate a whole lot in between on things other than what everybody's working on. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It is, but in a great running entrepreneurial company, usually there's like a few things that need to work. There's like a sales and marketing function, an operations function, and a finance function.
Okay, so those three parts. Okay.
Yeah, those three. Gino, when he pulled all the levers and figured out what does it take, he found that the ones who really have figured it out, they figured that out.
Yeah,
so
and you've got leaders in all three of those areas.
And that's where I'm going. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Basically, you got to give those leaders the ability to do their job without stepping on their toes, and and let them make their decisions. Sometimes you go into an organization and it's like there's a solopreneur who has a bunch of contractors under them that play different functions, but they look to that leader to make every decision for them. That's the opposite of autonomy. The leader, when they let go and they elevate to their unique position and they delegate out the parts that they have hired somebody else to do, that's what creates a lot of great things in a company. But you have to be willing to be open and honest to say, hey, I don't know are you okay with this? Are we going to be okay letting go of that, or maybe there's an issue here. So you have to be able to work through any feelings of mistrust when you let go.
Yeah, my understanding is that when you have these meetings, that you talk about that like at face value, right? I mean, that you're having very, very direct conversations about how effective everybody is being. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, it starts with making sure you've built the right structure for the organization.
Okay.
And then when you build that great structure, the people you put in the seats in these functions, you make sure that they get it, that they get the role, that the 5 or 6 roles that are in their function. You design 5 or 6 roles for every seat. So you ask them, do you get what this is? And meaning, is it in your DNA? Do you understand it? Like you ask a graphic designer, do you know what a logo is, or could you sketch something? They get it. You ask the bookkeeper the same thing, and they don't get it, right? You ask them, do you want it? And anybody in a hiring position, in a job, they're trying to get hired, they may say they want it, but it takes a little experience to know, and a little bit of time with somebody to know if they really want it. That Colby we were talking about earlier helps you understand the want a little bit more deeply. And we ask, do you have capacity to do it? Meaning, do you have the learned ability or the background, experience, education to do it? So we call that, it's one of the EOS acronyms, GWC. Mm-hmm. Do you get it? Do you want to have capacity? So when you put somebody in a seat and you ask them, and you ask the team, hey, do you think this guy gets it? Does he want it? Do you have capacity?
That's something that doesn't happen in meetings unless it's like a true EOS meeting. I mean, that's so cool.
Well, you set that up. You set every seat up in your organization. Then when you, as a leader, you need to delegate out, hey, I trust that you're going to get those leads, marketing person, because I know you GWC your role. Now you can just let go. Now it's just happening. You know that they're going to do what they said they'd do and what you believe they'd do. if they don't, and if you don't understand, then you bring it up, you work through the issues.
Yeah.
But you have to, this is part of the system that you use to get to that deeper understanding and that deeper trust.
Very
so
good.
Remember I said there were two things that simplify?
Yeah.
Okay, so scorecard, people overcomplicate their scorecard. I just gave a couple ways that they do. There's more ways. There might be an implementer listening who would say, Jeff, here's a few other ways I see that people, and I did all of it, by the way. I complicated and then I'd simplify, and I'd never understood that simplifying was so important. But the other way that people don't often see is living and breathing your core values.
Okay.
When you define your core values for your organization, and Patrick Lencioni has a lot of great books and papers on this. When you define your core values, an EOS company is willing to hire, fire, reward, review, and recognize people based on those core values. It's a day-to-day. It's a day-to-day way of life. So gone are the ways of Enron, and saying integrity is a core value, and then nobody really doing it, or people just. I've actually fired a client for not following or believing in core values. I said, you're just not. We're not. It's not going to work.
We can't do this because
this won't work, because this is foundational, and this is something so simple, so simple. If you've defined these great core values. You hire on them and you fire on them. You reward people based on core values, and you recognize them. Hey, I saw you use that core value. One of ours is do the right thing. Sometimes not easy to do the right thing. And so even in the EOS community, when we see somebody was in a tough spot and they did the right thing, we give a shout out to them. And we sort of call it out in each other, and it just makes us realize we're in the right place. So the scary thing about core values is like calling somebody out if they don't have that core value. But you know what we've learned? We've learned that if you talk about your core values and you live them, people tend to just deselect themselves. They tend to just leave because they realize you care about that core value so much that I don't belong here. And they just leave.
Yeah.
So you don't have any tough conversations if you really lean into your core values.
Yeah.
And the folks who belong, they just lean in even more. And the unthanked hero of the company who does all the great stuff, who just doesn't ask for a thank you. Once in a while, when you recognize them on core values, they get a thank you.
Yeah.
So that's an added benefit of living those core values.
So when you go in and implement, do you help? Obviously, you're going to help them kind of define and write down what those core values are. Correct.
Correct.
And then how much time does that take? It seems like to me that could be a real, that could really be a key part of this, could take a good amount of that 60 days.
I used to think that too. And I read a lot about core values before EOS, and I thought, this is great stuff, but I'll never hit the nail on the head. It wasn't until I worked with an implementer that I realized once you have them, it's like something you see and you can't unsee. So in our first 90-minute leadership team workshop that implementers do, we describe these core values as I've described them here, and we describe how we use them. But on the second day that we meet with somebody, we actually begin to define those core values, and we have
that soon. Okay.
We start right then, and in that day we actually define them. Gino took a bunch of different things from different places and figured out how to bring core values out of an entrepreneurial company. And what he did, I always bring it back to Gino's story, because he was out there trying to figure stuff out, and all the tools out there were for enterprise, or for big organizations and mid-market, some mid-market stuff. But there was nothing out there for small, hungry businesses. And he obsessed about this. He found that 1 in 20 of the companies sort of figured it out. They knew what they were doing. But the 19 out of 20, they were frustrated. They lost their profit. They're like, tried everything. It wasn't working. They're frustrated, essentially. And he just obsessed about these guys. And when he did, he tried everything to figure out, what's their roadmap? What's their plan need to look like? What things should they work on? So he built 6 components that he said he realized there's 6 things that if they strengthen those 6 to 80% or better, their company will work well. And in each of those 6, in each of those 6 items, he built tools, and one of those tools to helps folks with their vision is this one called the Vision Traction Organizer. Inside that are core values. So just giving you a map of where it is. So
where it is, it's in there.
It's in there.
Yeah.
It's in there. It's one of the first things we teach in that first 60 days.
So give me some examples of some really good core values that you've seen, come out in these companies that maybe they didn't even realize they had until y'all talked about them.
Oh, that's a tough question. Because it's so personal to every organization.
Sure. Yeah.
And the one I could tell you, the ones that I see that are common, humbly smart or humble.
Okay.
I see humble. I see work ethic, like hardworking. I see that one a lot. And I also see the absence of that one. And I see people sort of struggling with that one sometimes and not realizing, hey, we should have that one in there because we're all that. They don't want to scare anybody off sometimes. They want to say, oh, you don't have to. We all work 60-hour work weeks. But so I see people struggling figuring it out sometimes, but it takes time. When we build these core values, we build a first draft, and then every quarter we revisit it to say, do these still make sense? And if anybody saw anything that's off, or they need to discuss it, we fine tune it. So it does evolve. It does evolve.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
Yeah. I
also would assume that those core values kind of start at the top and come down. Like, for a smaller organization, like you said, that that the main leader is the one that probably not only is kind of defines it, but then also is the one that kind of holds, first of all, him or herself accountable to it, and then the rest. Is that true?
I'm going to blow your mind here.
Yeah? No?
That's not true.
Really? Okay.
We take the leaders in the room and we discover the core values in the people who are out of the room, because the leaders have brought in great people in the organization, and those core values are often found in the great staff that they already have.
Wow. And I would have thought that staff would have been attracted to whatever those core values were that the organization had. Because, you think about, when you're hiring somebody, that's something that you talk about. Well, here, this is kind of what we're all about. Is that a fit? But you're saying that over time, I guess, these leaders bring from outside these values that start to become an actual part of the organization.
Usually the leaders have this core value, and they attract more people with that core value. So the way we go about finding it is often in the staff, is in the people you find outside the room. And in doing that, we kind of discover it's here in the room as well.
Okay. I would think so. Okay.
It's one of the methods we use to discover these core values. And we go through a series of discovery methods to really confirm, do we have the right ones? It would take weeks or days, and it would take research, as you'd suspect, but because we have a proven process for that and a lot of things, we find it quickly. It's discovery of the core values, as like critical as it sounds, is not the hard work. It's not it's incredible. And when we actually discover them as a team, everybody's just usually in awe. They have a great day. They love that they've discovered these things. Yeah. The hard work is in the execution.
All right, let's talk about that then. So you kind of have set your KPI, so to speak. You've got some values that you feel like that you live by, and now that hard work. So what does that look like? Well,
in the context of core values.
Okay.
If you're going to hire based on core values, that means you're saying this is the right person because I can see that they've got these, say, 3 to 7 core values. So the hiring manager is looking at this person saying, have I seen this? Do they have stories that sound like that? It's a different way of hiring. A lot of times people just look at the job description and say, have you done this before? Or they have them take an assessment. But really saying, I'm not going to hire this guy because I don't see that core value in them. By doing that, you kind of avoid a future disaster. But that takes a lot of commitment to hire based on that.
Yeah, I guess so. So that's the way I've always hired, actually, is, based upon, somebody that I feel like fits from the standpoint of our values and who we are and integrity and things like that. But I've made some mistakes because I'll do that, but there are other things you need to hire for as well, correct? Now, I would say that that's maybe the most important. But then, like you said, the right people and the right seats and that sort of thing. Where do you go from there after you've found that they fit from a value standpoint?
Well, yeah, I was saying hire, fire, reward, review, and recognize.
Okay.
It's, if you get a feel for it, and you say, yeah, they all have them all there. If one of them isn't really there, you might have to fire them.
Yeah.
If somebody's missing a core value, they have the opposite of that core value.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That could be problematic, especially if they're the opposite of what everybody else has.
But there are other factors you're hiring off of as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. But would you fire based on a core value?
I think I would, actually, to be quite honest.
That's good.
But I've been around the block. I've had experiences where,
you've learned to do this.
Yeah, I've blown this one. Okay.
Would you take, I'll tell you, the 30-year-old version of me I'd be like, we're going to carry this guy. He's got great numbers, this is a key.
Oh, it's never worth it.
I worked for 6 months to get this guy in the door. Yeah. There's no way I'm letting go of him just because, he's inappropriate.
Or how am I going to replace him?
How am I going to replace him?
Yeah.
But you have to, for the long-term greater good of the company. You have to let go of that person who does that. So firing based on a core value is hard to do. It's hard to. So that's where it can get. That's one of the ways it can get difficult on execution. But it's not like it's a lot of time that needs to be spent, or there's a difficult process. It's just that core value is not there. You need to take action.
Yeah.
So execution is difficult. It's difficult. But if you do it, it works.
So if you have somebody that fits all the values of your company, they just fit like a glove, but it sounds like to me, you might still not have them in the right seat. And that's a part of this process too. Is that correct? Trying to find exactly where they fit and where their skills and their passion is.
Right. Yeah. So that's where we use that GWC I was talking about. Yeah. Get, wants, and has capacity. And in that book, I've got a copy. I can put it up. It's Traction by Gino Wickman. There's a great.
We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Great.
Yeah, we'll put that in.
We describe the accountability chart, and if anybody wants more information on that, you can ask any EOS implementer to tell you more. They'd be glad to bring you into one of their talks or a leadership team workshop. And in that talk, we talk about or in the workshop, we talk about the accountability chart, where we figure out that right structure for the organization with those three major functions built out according to how the leadership team sees the company doing well in the future. When you decide that structure of all the major functions in your organization, you then build the 5 or 6 roles in each of those functions. And when you match somebody who is a core value fit, they're a right person. Now, to make sure they're in the right seat, you just need to test them with that GWC. Do you get, want, and have capacity? Recently, I was starting with a leadership team who had a VP sales, a VP operations, and a finance guy. They had all three.
They had all three.
Full set. Yeah. And the ops guy wanted to also be what we call in EOS an integrator, which is like somebody who harmoniously orchestrates those three functions. And that's great. And the finance guy wanted to, he GWC'd what we call the visionary role. A visionary and an integrator can't be more different. Visionary is kind of, they're pie in the sky. They come with a lot of ideas to every meeting. They're great with big relationships. But if you get them working on execution of things, you find that there's these spikes of energy and then it just fades, and it fades. Sometimes when I say that to folks, they're like, "Oh, I know that happened."
Yeah, you just did that to me, actually.
Yeah. The integrator is like the one who can really keep that going. So if you have that visionary and integrator, you get them working well together. There's another EOS book on this called Rocket Fuel. I got to plug Rocket Fuel. by Gino Wickman and Mark Winters. Mark Winters, local implementer.
Yeah.
Where they talk more in more depth about that visionary integrator relationship. But getting back to your question, how do we, once these guys came together, they've pretty well got a classic setup. But when I asked them if they get one enough capacity for their role, what we realized very quickly was the sales guy said, I don't really want sales role. I can do it. But you know what I really want is operations. The operations guy said, I don't really want operations. I want the integrator role. So we moved them around. Suddenly, the guy who came in as the lead of sales is now the lead of operations. The guy who was leading operations is now purely the integrator, which is an incredible role.
Yeah.
He may be in another seat in the organization or two, which is great. But they realized also that there's now a hole. There's a gap.
Yeah, in sales.
In sales. And so they said, we've got a guy. He's just incredible. He's better than us in many ways. In some ways, he's who we wish we were when we were just starting out. Like, they spoke so highly of him. This isn't exactly what they said. They just made him sound great.
Yeah.
He said, and I said, well, why isn't he here? He said, well, we didn't know how to test to see if he was right for this role. He's only been here 6 months. I said, well, if you lost him, where would you be? Oh, we'd be lost. We need him. I said, well, let's just do it in the room. This guy in this role, and we read out every one of the 5 roles that they defined for the sales leadership seat. Does he get it? And they all went, oh yeah. Does he want it? Oh, he wants it. He wants it. Does he have the capacity to learn? And they said, yes. I said, guys, you bring him into the room next time. That's your sales leader.
How about that? Yeah.
And so he's now in the room. He's now in the room.
6 months into the job.
And the big aha for him, or for the team, even without him there, was they just saw, wow, that's a way better fit. We wouldn't have seen it on our own. So I just facilitated that. I didn't tell them, because how would I know? I wouldn't know. I'm just the dumb guy with the marker at the board. I just asked them, can you GW? And so I took them through the system, man. And they left with like, they just know that they're going to grow. They can just sense that this is the beginning of some greatness.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, let's talk about Colby just a little bit. We can jump around and we can jump back, but I definitely wanted to talk about Colby because you are a Colby, let me read it, which specialist. You're an EOS implementer. See, I'm labeling you. And you're a Colby specialist, which means that you know how to provide the Colby test and read it and help people, right?
Well, Colby is the one sort of psychometric analysis that we teach in EOS.
Psychometric.
Oh, that's just a way of saying assessment.
Okay. All right.
Assessment.
Sounded cool, by the way.
Well, yeah. There's in a previous life, I was a software developer who built those things.
Uh-huh.
And so many years ago, over 20 years ago now, that's how I got my start. So I sometimes the language slips.
Okay.
And I will say
I like it though. So I'm going to try to slip that into some of my lingo here sometime this week.
Yeah, you're not supposed to. I'm not. Anyways, I just built these things. And I sort of understood them. I said, that's pretty cool. One day I'll use it. And then one day I did need to use some of these tools when hiring. So I used Strengths Finders. I used Myers-Briggs. I used DISC. And I came across Colby, and I tried Colby. And I tried different things over the years before I got into EOS and after. But with EOS, what happened was when I had an implementer, he said, why don't you check this thing out, this Colby. I'm going to teach you guys Colby at our next quarterly meeting. So go study up. And so I sat there with an executive, and we both had our Colby tests out. And I said, it says congratulations at the top. I don't believe in any of this stuff. I mean, I use it sometimes. Sometimes it works. I didn't believe it. I was a naysayer. Yeah. I was not a believer. And I was about to leave this guy's office, and I said, wait a sec. Let me look at yours, and you look at mine. Let's see if they're different, because everything I saw in mine, it just looks anecdotal. Mm. So we switched, and I'm like, wow, that's you. And he said, yeah, I agree. This one describes you. So we we kind of discovered two things at once there. We discovered that and that was the Kolbe we're looking at, when you've been living in your own strengths and and you read your own assessment, you don't realize that the rest of the world doesn't think or work the way that you do or have the same instincts as you do. So when I was reading my own assessment, I thought, these are just...
Yeah, this is normal stuff.
This is just normal stuff.
Yeah.
But when I looked at his, I'm like, this is not normal. This is. So
that's interesting.
I learned that, but I also kind of realized there's probably some truth to this thing. So I went a little deeper. My implementer taught me a little, and then I just learned a little bit more. I went a little deeper myself. And then when I became an EOS implementer, I became certified in it so that I could help people a little bit more. The problem I found in running software companies is that technical leads and technical architects want each other's jobs. They get to, and this is a common thing in a lot of businesses. Somebody gets enough seniority and ability that everybody trusts them, so they give them a leadership position, but they're not necessarily ready for it. And in the technical world, a technical lead and an architect are kind of higher ranking positions.
Sure.
But they're very different. A technical lead actually leads people and has to read the room and understand how to keep people on track. An architect is a deep diver. An architect is somebody who solves the problems nobody else can solve.
Yeah, he's just sitting there doing if-thens all the way through. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also like they're doing the stuff nobody else can do.
Yeah.
They're like the Navy SEAL of the you know what I mean? So I would get them to take this test, and I could tell by looking at their assessment which one they would be more like, because they could tell me anything, and they're smarter than I was. So there's no way they could lie to me easily, but the assessment would tell me who they really are.
Yeah, which direction they should go.
So when I saw that somebody was like into research, deeply, like super deeply, can't change it. It's in his DNA to love research and process, which Kolbe would tell me. I'd be like, "You're an architect, aren't you?"
Mm-hmm.
But if he was telling me he was a tech lead, I'd ask questions like, "So tell me how you dealt with two people not getting along on a project."
Yeah.
And he would tell me something that would be like really not very high level. Not an expert at that. And vice versa. If I asked somebody who was a tech lead who wanted to be an architect, I'd ask them how did they find information, and they could. Anyways, the conversations that would ensue when I would actually ask these people these deep cutting questions, I had a couple interviewees break down on me. Like one of them cried.
Oh wow!
Because
it's such an emotional experience for them to just.
Well, when you ask the question that they don't want you to ask, or that you ask the question that makes them kind of change or grow in the room, this happened to me before I got in. Did do what I'm doing today. So this, asking those tough questions can sometimes change somebody's trajectory, and can also tell you whether you're on the right path as a hiring manager. So now with Kolbe, what I do is I teach teams if there's some strain in the role and somebody's having a hard time talking about why their role is difficult, Kolbe can help suss that out and help them figure it out. Also, the Kolbe can sort of help you find out of all the things you do, what things should you delegate, which parts are really not in your wheelhouse. You can still be accountable to them, but you might want to make somebody else responsible for them.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Which is really good for that, what you said at the beginning, trying to get leaders to trust people below them and to delegate. So maybe Kolbe kind of gives a leader a list. Here, maybe start here, right?
It does, and it kind of allows you to see what you already know. Sometimes, like, hey, I do like that, so I'll look a little bit more deeply to find more things that are in my wheelhouse that are like that. So it's not a personality assessment. There's just a little Kolbe deep dive on this.
Yeah.
There's three parts of your mind. There's a cognitive, the affective, and the conative. Conative is your will, is your instinct. And back in before modern psychology really took place, all the ancients said that there were these three parts of the mind. Only in the last few hundred years did modern psychology say we're just gonna worry about the cognitive, the thinking part of your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and the affective, the feeling part of your mind. But the cognitive has been ignored. The cognitive, if you get hit
Fight
with
or flight, all
yeah,
that. Yeah.
if you get hit with a
No.
brain injury, why can you still make coffee, but you
Yeah.
can't talk, but you can
Right,
make coffee?
right.
Why? Because it's your will, it's your instinct. You have instincts in you.
Yeah.
So this is
It's your hardwired part,
yeah,
right?
it's a hardwired part.
Yeah.
And there's no assessments out there other than the Kolbe with a K that actually measures that. So it measures 12 strengths.
That would be really helpful.
It's so cool.
Because
and when you can apply it to business, it's like, well, yeah. So Dan Sullivan, he's a big advocate. Dan Sullivan, the author of, Who Not How, 10X Not 2X, and Strategic Coach founder.
Right.
He on social media, he's ripping it up, talking about how this is the delegate and elevate tool. So I'm glad he is too, because the Kolbe Corporation, the way they look at it, like, we have a wonderful tool and we believe everyone's equal, so they don't really sell themselves as much. And so I love that Dan's out there helping business leaders understand this is a seriously powerful tool. Yeah.
Well, that I didn't realize that, because here we've been talking a lot about that hardwired part of your brain, because we try to figure, because that part of your brain doesn't think rationally.
Right.
Okay. And we find in investing that there's a whole lot of irrationality, that happens. And, our job as advisors is to minimize that, right? Make sure that we can make some good decisions. Yet for the most part, as humans, we tend to not be in the rational part of our brain. So we spend a lot of time thinking and talking about how to communicate at that level. So that's very interesting.
Well, we should do a Kolbe assessment. So I can teach you these 12, because if you actually had your clients take the Kolbe, you'd be able to help them with it, but also you'd be able to predict, how they're going to take action.
Yeah.
And it actually predicts how if you're given a problem or any sort of dilemma, what's the first thing that you're going to do. So you're initiating action.
Yeah, and that's that fight or flight, right?
Well, it measures 12 things, but it's got these 4 modes. They're really easy. I'll just tell you the 4. Some people initiate with research. They're going to first thing, oh, well, we got a problem. We got to research. Some people will build a process. They'll be like, okay, well, forget what we were doing. We got to figure out how we need to do it now. Mm-hmm. It's the how for some. Some people, the third mode is risk. So some folks will only do things if it's been done before. Others will just keep spitballing. The ones who initiate, they will just keep trying things in order to see that it works or not. So that how you deal with risk is the third mode.
Yeah.
And that's the one that I think would be high risk.
That's the one.
Because we can actually measure that. We can measure that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And then the 4th is implementer. So we are 3-dimensional beings, and some of us are actually good with our hands and good with mechanical things. So we can actually measure if somebody spends more time solving a problem by building a model. And some people actually do that. They actually build models to solve problems.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah,
that is very good. Well, this has been good, Jeff. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to learn more about EOS and about that important role that you have in bringing this to these different companies that I know I've seen make huge changes. Like you said, you saw it with your company go to triple what it was before in what, 3 or 4 years. That's amazing.
3 years. Yeah.
3 years. Triple in 3 years. We're all looking for that kind of stuff. Everything that you said makes so much sense to me. It's just, it seems like such a complex world at times. And we're just dealing with complexity. And it just sounds so, I guess you could say, relieving in a way to think that, there are folks out there trying to simplify this stuff for us so that we can actually take action and improve. What a cool job you have.
It's great. And, entrepreneurs, they're the best people to work for because their heart's in it. Their heart's in it. They mortgage their houses to keep their company afloat. Like, who puts this much into it? That's why I had to ditch it all, sell it all off and do this, because I realized I'm helping people. Like, this And I really relate to them. The more they put into it, the more I lean in. And the more I lean in, I just keep telling them this message of simplification and of, help them get more of what they want from their business. So, I help them get their vision, help them figure out what that vision is for their company, help them work with discipline and accountability, and then help them with team health. That's all I do.
That's it.
That's all I do. And it's as simple as that. And you put those three things together and it works.
That's awesome. Well, tell us how we can get in touch with you if we want to discuss further. Is there a good email or phone number? If you just tell us it verbally, we'll put it in the show notes so folks will have it.
Sure. I got a new web URL. It's eosjeff.com.
Like it. So EOS Jeff, no period in there, anything. Just
eosjeff.com. www.eosjeff.com. Takes you to my site. There's a little thing you can schedule a thing with me to talk or learn more about EOS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, so we'll put that in the show notes so that folks can get in touch with you and discuss further. Again, really appreciate you being on the show today. This is one that I've really been looking forward to. Been wanting to get some EOS talk going for all those entrepreneurs and founders out there that listen. So really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Rob. It's great.
Yeah. For those of you listening, we try to put this out every other week. With very much a focus on business owners, entrepreneurs, and just trying to help you elevate and be a success. So look for more of these versions coming out soon. We really appreciate y'all joining us. Have a great week. Take care.